What if the surname you've carried your entire life isn't telling the whole story? Imagine opening a dusty box in your grandmother's attic and finding an old family Bible, a handful of faded photographs, and a bundle of letters that nobody has touched for decades. At first, nothing seems remarkable. Then you notice a name you've never heard before, a woman born more than 200 years ago. Curious, you begin investigating. One record leads to another. A baptism register becomes a marriage license. A marriage license leads to a will. A will uncovers a forgotten land document. Months later, you discover something completely unexpected. That seemingly ordinary woman may have descended from a family connected to medieval nobility. And if that's possible for her, could it be possible for you? Across Britain, millions of people grow up believing their family history begins with farmers, miners, laborers, fishermen, blacksmiths, shepherds, or factory workers. Yet historians and genealogists have long understood something that sounds almost unbelievable at first. A surprisingly large number of people with deep British ancestry can trace at least one line back to medieval kings, queens, or noble families. Not because their ancestors secretly lived in castles, and certainly not because a crown is hidden somewhere in the attic, but because of mathematics, centuries of social mixing, and Britain's extraordinary survival of historical records. If you enjoy uncovering hidden British ancestry, forgotten bloodlines, and the surprising stories buried inside old records, make sure you subscribe now, turn on notifications, and let me know in the comments where your family comes from. Every week we dive into real family mysteries and show exactly how ordinary people uncover extraordinary ancestors. Now, before you dismiss this as wishful thinking, let's look at the maths. You have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, and 16 great-great-grandparents. Every generation doubles the number of ancestral positions in your family tree. By the time you go back around 600 years, you theoretically have more than 1 million ancestral slots. Go back another few centuries, and the numbers become impossible because there simply were not enough people alive to fill them all. This creates a phenomenon known as pedigree collapse, where the same ancestors appear multiple times in your family tree. Families living in neighboring villages often marry distant cousins without ever knowing it. Generation after generation, branches folded back into one another until entire populations became interconnected. Now combine that reality with another crucial fact. Most ordinary medieval people left very little evidence behind. They may appear once in a tax record or briefly in a parish register and then disappear from history. Wealthy families, however, left mountains of paperwork. They generated wills, inheritance disputes, court cases, property transactions, marriage agreements, and land grants. In other words, the further back you go, the more likely you are to encounter people who left substantial records. That's why noble and royal connections appear so frequently in documented family trees. Not because they were your only ancestors, but because they are among the easiest ancestors to identify. History itself also played a major role. Imagine a knight returning home during the Wars of the Roses. His family owns land, enjoys status, and expects to pass both to future generations. Then his side loses. The estate is confiscated. Wealth disappears. Within a few generations, his descendants are no longer landowners. They become farmers, merchants, craftsmen, and tradesmen. 300 years later, their descendants may have no idea they share a connection to families that once stood close to the throne. Titles disappear, estates are sold, fortunes vanish. But descendants continue. History is filled with noble families that slowly blended back into ordinary society. One of the biggest misconceptions people have is that noble ancestry should be obvious from their surname. In reality, surnames are often among the least useful clues. Every generation doubles your ancestors. Within just a few centuries, most of your family tree consists of people who never carried your surname at all. Many royal and noble connections enter family trees through daughters who married outside their social class. Their daughters did the same, and so did their granddaughters. Eventually, the connection became invisible. That's why so many proven royal descents are discovered through maternal lines rather than famous surnames. Before we go any further, it's important to separate fact from fantasy. Having royal ancestry does not mean wealth, privilege, special status, or unique DNA. It simply means that somewhere in your family tree there is a documented chain connecting you to an ancestor whose lineage has already been well recorded. That's all. No magic, no secret powers, just evidence. And evidence is where genealogy becomes truly fascinating. Most people start by looking for famous names. Experienced genealogists do the opposite. They look for documents. They follow records wherever they lead. A census leads to a birth certificate. A birth certificate leads to a marriage record. A marriage record identifies a father. A probate record confirms the relationship. An apprenticeship record uncovers another generation. Slowly, carefully, and methodically, a story begins to emerge. Sometimes that story leads nowhere remarkable. Sometimes it leads somewhere astonishing. At this point, If you're enjoying this deep dive into British ancestry and family history, take a moment to subscribe and join our growing community of family history detectives. Every week, we explore real records, real families, and real historical mysteries. The more people who subscribe, the more time I can dedicate to uncovering these stories and sharing new discoveries with all of you. And one of the greatest secrets of genealogy is that the most valuable records are often the least glamorous. Many experienced researchers swear by wills rather than DNA tests. Wills identify children, spouses, daughters, sons-in-law, neighbors, witnesses, and properties. A single sentence buried inside a probate document can solve a mystery that has frustrated researchers for years. One forgotten inheritance clause can reveal connections that no family story ever preserved. This is why genealogists become obsessed with old paperwork. The records often tell stories far richer than family legends. People frequently ask whether DNA can prove royal ancestry. The answer is no. There is no royal gene, no king marker, no queen chromosome. DNA is an incredibly useful tool, but it works best as supporting evidence. It helps identify cousins, confirm relationships, and strengthen conclusions. What it cannot do is replace the paper trail. If you want to prove a connection to a medieval king or queen, records remain the gold standard. The truly remarkable thing about British genealogy is not that some people descend from royalty. The remarkable thing is that so many people potentially do. Centuries of population mixing, combined with the mathematics of ancestry, make shared medieval ancestors increasingly likely the further back you go. The challenge has never been whether those connections exist. The challenge is proving them. And that's where the real adventure begins. Because when you start researching your family history, you often discover stories far more fascinating than royalty itself. You uncover soldiers who fought in forgotten wars, merchants who crossed oceans, miners who survived disasters, entrepreneurs who built businesses, border reavers who lived by the sword, and ordinary men and women whose decisions shaped generations of descendants. In many cases, those stories become the true treasures of family history. So before we finish, think about this. Somewhere tonight, a forgotten will sits in an archive waiting to be discovered. Somewhere, a parish register contains a name that could connect 2 generations. Somewhere, a land record, court case, or marriage license is holding the missing piece of someone's family puzzle. And perhaps that puzzle belongs to your family. Kindly hit the subscribe button as it helped the channel to fuel discoveries. Also tell me in the comments what surnames you're researching, where your ancestors came from, and who the earliest documented ancestor in your tree is. I read every comment, and many future videos are inspired by the discoveries viewers share. The next remarkable family history mystery we investigate may begin with your story. Because in genealogy, the greatest treasures are rarely crowns, castles, or coats of arms. They are the documents, the wills, the forgotten records, the names that history almost lost. And sometimes, when those pieces finally come together, the truth they reveal is far more extraordinary than fiction.